Candidate Beto O'Rourke here for our next governor, who will be the next governor of Texas. And I just want to touch a couple of things that when I was in office, that especially the last 2 years during the crisis of COVID and especially the snowvid and the infamous event that happened under the bridge. Beto and I actually have communicated for the last, pretty much my entire term. I mean, I met you in the beginning when I introduced you out there at Brown Plaza, and we've kept in touch this entire time. And so when I reached out to him during the crises that we've had here in town, he's always been available and has always had connections that I needed behind the scenes to help be that elected official that you expect here in Del Rio. And I can tell you, going back through COVID and the determinations that we had on council, we got a lot of direction and a lot of information from different parts of the state, and Beto was one of the guys that helped connect me to those individuals. Secondly, when we had snowvid, and when I was fighting for electricity to not be shut down for our water plants, and it still happened, Beto was right there behind the scenes connecting me to individuals in the state that I needed to address the concerns that our water was going to be without power. And of course, ERCOT decided to go ahead and not keep the water and the electricity running in our community. That was extremely challenging for all of us. I had to leave my mom and the family while I was dealing with at the EOC with that event. And not to mention also that the federal government was going to be releasing migrants that same day that many of you may not even be aware of, but they were going to release migrants into our community. And if it wasn't for Beto having built the relationships that I needed at the federal level, they would have been released on top of the crisis that we were experiencing here in Del Rio that week. And we all remember that. We were all freezing in our homes. So the communication that we need to establish as a mayor to a governor is very important. And I can tell you that Beto not only communicated with me during that event, he communicated with several other mayors along the border. And furthermore, during the border crisis, it was Beto that helped get me in communication with Washington, D.C., and all you have seen the pictures that I was invited to Washington, D.C. as a result of that, but it all began with Beto's stern, honest, and heartfelt need to help this community out, because he's also from the border. He's from El Paso, Texas. And I can tell you that those relationships that we've built, those relationships that we have built through my term and through his outreach to us is not just in Del Rio. I can attest that I've spoken to other mayors along the border, and he's reached out to those mayors as well. He's had us been able to contact different congressional offices throughout the entire border during the crisis, during the winter storm. So I've spoken to several mayors, and I can attest that he not only reaches out to me, he reaches out to several mayors throughout the entire state. And that's the kind of leadership that we need in this community, that we have relationships with somebody in that position that is not just coming down here for photo opportunities when it's convenient. And that's exactly what was happening on several occasions that I witnessed firsthand. Lastly, and this is something that hit home, and we're going to introduce a teacher from Uvalde, but when I got word of the mass shooting in Uvalde, I mean, that hit home. I mean, my mom and I cried the entire week. It was something that this community, we knew people from there. I mean, we know some of those students and the teachers, and it was very close to our community. Beto has unfortunately experienced that same similar crisis in El Paso a couple years ago, and nothing has been done since. We also had right after El Paso the Midland Odessa, and I was already in office, and I cannot tell you how fearful a lot of us mayors were that we might be the next target, because that individual drove from the Dallas-Fort Worth area and targeted a community that is brown. They targeted El Paso because they're brown. That individual has so much hateful rhetoric built inside because of the failed leadership that we've had that is pouring out and supporting this hateful rhetoric spewing from the capital of Texas. And I can tell you, as somebody who's the first openly proud gay mayor, a veteran, a brown person from Del Rio, Texas, I stand for human rights. This community is not bothered by who I love, and you're not bothered by the fact that we're all brown. I was leading this community, and we need somebody to support our rights and support our teachers' needs to feel safe in their schools, and especially for our children. My niece and my nephew and all of your grandchildren, all of your children, your nieces, and your own cousins and family members deserve the right and freedom to go to school and not worry about being shot down. And on that note, I'm going to introduce to you a very special human being from Uvalde, Texas, Mr. Chris Carrillo.
Yikes. So I was reached out by Miss Kate Roberts, that's with Mr. Beto, on Tuesday or Wednesday, I believe, and they said, would you mind saying a word? And I said, no, I wouldn't mind. Problem is, I'm not a public speaker. If everybody in here was a 7 or an 8-year-old, I could put on a show. But with adults, I don't know, I shut down a bit. So I'm gonna try my best, be nice. The reason I accepted was because of everything that happened. So just to clear up some misconceptions, I was born and raised here in Del Rio, still live here, worked for the district here for 4 years as a 2nd and 3rd grade teacher, and then some stuff happened, so I had to look elsewhere. Applied in Brackett, Eagle Pass, Uvalde, and Uvalde took me in. So I like to say that I'm Uvalde's adopted son. So I commute every day back and forth, which I've had some scares on the road. Can't lie, sometimes I stay late and have to come back home, get up and do it all over again the next day. But I do it because I do it for my family, my wife, Laura, and my daughter, Sophia, who's 4. And I do it for the kids, because the kids are everything to me. Especially male teachers in an elementary setting. There aren't very many of us. There's only about, I could probably count them on one hand at my campus. So, with that being said, that day was like any other day. We had the kids playing outside, and I'm actually a co-teacher, so in my room there are 2 teachers, in one class. So that day we had them playing outside, and somebody, I can't remember who it was a teacher though, yelled out that there were shots. We got all of our kids inside, and my co-teacher at the time said, let me make sure that the door is locked, because our door is only locked from the outside. She stayed outside, jiggled it a bit, make sure it was locked. I opened it up for her. When I opened it up for her, we could hear the shots. And that's when we knew, because we had lockdowns before for bailouts and high-speed chases in the area and stuff like that. But we knew that this was something more serious. How serious, how close to us it was, we weren't sure, because our priority was the kids. Turn off the lights, turned off our little big screen that we have that we do our work on, show videos and stuff, and just prayed with our kids, had them off to the corner with us in the dark, some with tears in their eyes, me with tears in my eyes, texting my wife the entire time. Because of her, I knew what was going on more than we did there. And then I get asked, so how long were you there? How long were you in your room and stuff? So it was close to about 2 hours. We were one of the last classes that was evacuated from that school. So it was the longest 2 hours of my life. Not knowing exactly what's going on. Then we get out of there, get escorted to the Civic Center, which is where all the parents were hysterical, picking up their kids. And we were looking around hoping to see every kid, every teacher. We were like, we are a family there. We were all hoping to see each other, and when we didn't, that's when we knew something was wrong and something had happened. So that's why I accepted this to stand here today, because I know that we need change. We need major change. I stand here representing all teachers, but also my 2 coworkers that we lost, and those 19 kids. One of them was personally my student the year before, Rogelio Torres. May he rest in peace. But all of those kids, they were so kind. Every day I'd see them, I didn't even know some of them, and they would give me a high five or a hug, and they knew my name. I didn't even know their name. That's how small a community was. It's like here, it's like Del Rio. I still see kids that I had when I was here, and they give me a hug. And I'm like, who are you? And then they tell me, oh yeah. I tell her, my first class here, they're 10th graders now. I'm like, whoa, I feel old. So, to me, to wrap this up, it's not about red, it's not about blue, I don't care, green, yellow, pink, whatever. It's not about party affiliation to me. It's about choosing what's right. Choosing who is right. And I just feel like, I was telling my wife this the other day, and it's something that I didn't even know. Texas has had the most school shootings out of any state in the country since 2012. And that's sad because I tell my wife, I love this state. I love everything about this state. I feel like we have the best people, best culture, best music, everything. Sadly, we don't have the best leadership. And so, that's why I tell her, that's why I accept it. Because I mean, if it were up to me, where would be that? Yeah, I would have chose you to speak. Because you or Bruno, wherever he's at too. There he is. Yeah, not me. But like I said, I'm here for all the teachers, for women, because the women are important in my life. I feel like they deserve better. All of you deserve better. Everybody in this room deserves better. We as people deserve better. Better representation. So if you are a young person in this room, I encourage you to get out and vote. My grandpa, may he rest in peace as well, because of him I vote to this day. He's the one that told me, if you want to make a difference, you have to get out there and vote. So I do, still to this day. And with that being said, like I said, we need some change, and I feel like that person for change is here, in this room. So everybody give a big hand for the next governor of Texas, Beto O'Rourke.
Del Rio, thank you for welcoming us back. Thank you for being with us tonight. Thank you for making us so proud. This is exactly where we want to be right now. I love you too. I love you too, and I feel it from you. I gotta tell you, it also makes me proud to listen to former Mayor Lozano, who is absolutely correct. You know, never asked a single constituent, whether they were a Republican or a Democrat, who they loved, to whom they prayed, how many generations they could count themselves a Texan, whether they came here last week. Always wanted to make sure that he delivered for the people who put him into that position of public trust. Always reached out to me. And if I could help, I always did. Sometimes just reached out to say, hey Beto, how are you feeling? Heard that you weren't doing so well lately. Want to make sure that you're okay. His beautiful, amazing mother had us over to their house to have this gourmet dish that you all call Salas Burgers at their house, at their dining room table. I mean, that's the kind of hospitality that you all demonstrate here. To listen to Susan Hayes, her fierce advocacy on the part of people, especially in rural Texas, who for far too long have been taken for granted by this governor and this agricultural commissioner, who just thinks because if you live in rural Texas, you're red, you're Republican, they've got you in the bank, they don't have to show up or listen to you, learn from you, understand, or deliver to you. She's here to fight for you and to earn your vote. And I tell you what, put her in that position of public trust as agricultural commissioner, set her loose, and watch what she does for Valverde County, for every county across the state of Texas. We would be so lucky to have her. So please make sure that we vote for her on the ballot. And listen, sometimes I'm tempted when we're talking about Attorney General to say, look, wouldn't it be so nice if we had an Attorney General who wasn't indicted not once but twice, who wasn't under active FBI investigation, who didn't lead the Stop the Steal March on the 6th of January 2021, who did not, from the state of Texas, using our tax dollars, sue other states across the country, November 2020, to overturn a lawfully, legitimately decided election. I mean, yes, it would be nice if we didn't have that guy, but even if we had someone else, having Rochelle Garza up against anyone in the world, not only is she a proud fronteriza, not only is she a brand new mom, but tell me there is a more fierce fighter on the planet today to stand up for the women of this state who are under attack unlike any women anywhere else in the United States of America today. Let's get behind Rochelle Garza and make sure she's our next Attorney General. And we're going to hear from our current mayor in just a moment. But let me say this. Listening to Chris has got to fill you with pride. For every classroom teacher, every school counselor, and I listen to you counselors, and you tell me you're up 500 to 1, 800 to 1, 1,000 to 1 in some school districts. You're supposed to take care of 1,000 kids because somehow in the 9th largest economy on the planet, we have yet to come up with the resources to hire more counselors to help you to connect with more kids, to make sure that more of them can get through life right now after 2 years of pandemic, 2 years of learning loss, 2 years where some of them have lost a grandparent to COVID, or their folks lost their jobs, or their family lost their home, or that kid who's on free and reduced breakfast and lunch doesn't have a meal to go home to at the end of the day, is wearing the same dirty pair of jeans, probably the same dirty chones, day in and day out, because their folks do not have the extra cash to pay that forward. And very often it's that classroom teacher, that counselor, that librarian, who out of their own pocket pays for that third meal at the end of the day, pays for that new set of clothes so that kid can learn with pride, hold his head up high, just like every other kid in that classroom. These educators who are sacrificing for us the best years of their lives, who are taking on 2, sometimes 3 jobs in order to make ends meet. I cannot tell you how many times I've been at a world-class establishment like Doc Holliday's, drinking a cold beer, when the server on the other end of the bar says, you know what, Beto, I'm one of those teachers you talked about. I serve at this bar for the pleasure of taking care of kids in this kindergarten classroom Monday through Friday. I don't do it for spending cash. I don't do it for some extra income. I do it to pay the note on the mortgage, to put food in front of my kids. I do this just to survive. And on top of that, my governor pours indignity after indignity upon my head and into my classroom. He wants me to find the trans kid in my class and turn in their parents for child abuse and refer them over to CPS, which is running the worst foster care program in America, bar none. 32,000 kids in our custody and care. Some of them, too many of them tonight, will be sleeping in CPS offices, in the hallways, under the desks, atop the tables. Believe it or not, and you can look this up if you doubt me, 100 of them have died in our custody and care just in the last year and a half. Hundreds more have been trafficked for their bodies. Pictures taken of them and sent across the internet. That's in this state right now. And our governor's asking these teachers to turn in the parents of those kids, to refer those children over to CPS. He'll talk about critical race theory and the version of history that you're allowed to teach. He's going to make you take this high stakes, high pressure, standardized test that in no way effectively measures the potential inside of that kid or the effort expended on behalf of that teacher. You know, when we win this, we're going to cancel the STAR test, so you don't have to worry about that anymore. I just want to throw that in to make sure that you know that we can do better. But on top of all that, y además, we ask this teacher to contemplate what he or what she will do when that armed intruder enters that classroom. I know that because so many have approached me. Chemistry teachers who say, you know what, Beto, I feel kind of guilty. Because in my chemistry classroom, we have these big lab tables, and I know that I and my students can hide behind them, and those bullets probably can't penetrate. But that poor social studies teacher, or math teacher, or English teacher, she's not going to be so lucky. Another educator came up to me in San Antonio, and she said, my 14-year-old daughter approached me at the end of this last school year. She said, hey, Mom, when that gunman comes into your room, are you going to sacrifice yourself for those kids as those 2 teachers in Uvalde did? Or are you going to try to escape so you can come home and take care of us? And through tears, she is telling me this story. She's not sure that she can stay in the job. I do not blame her. We are losing educators in the state of Texas right now by the thousands. My 11-year-old Henry, who just finished 5th grade in June, did not have a permanent classroom teacher any single day of the year at Mesita Elementary. And when I said this to the parents sitting next to me at his 5th grade completion ceremony, they said, you know what? Same for my kid in a completely different class. I say that in Austin, heads are nodding. I say it in Del Rio, heads are nodding. We are seeing a mass exodus of these teachers. And for Chris, despite these pressures and challenges, to willingly go back into that classroom and to know that we are approaching 15 weeks since 19 children were taken from us. And those two teachers who had given the best years of their lives, gave their lives completely to try to protect those kids, and not a thing has changed to better protect him or those kids in front of a governor who could call a special session, who called a special session to go after trans kids, who called a special session to go after CRT, who called a special session after special session after special session to go after our election laws and the right to vote, could not be bothered to call a special election to save the lives of our kids. I'll tell you what, like many of you here, I am a parent. And with my wife, Amy, I'm raising a 15, a 14, and 11-year-old in El Paso. Their eyes are on us now. We face their judgment for what we do or what we fail to do. So I don't know about you, but I'm with Chris. We need change right now. We need to win this election. We need to make sure that we put the lives of our kids ahead of the interests of the NRA or the gun lobby or the current governor or anything else. There's nothing more important. Uvalde deserves justice. Uvalde deserves action. And we today are gathering and committing ourselves to do everything that it takes to deliver for them, to win this election, to make sure Democrats, Republicans, independents alike, that we come together. There's a lot that we're going to argue about. There are many things that we'll disagree on. But our kids, our grandkids, tell me something that there's more important that will bring more of us together at this defining moment of truth. You know all you need to know about this election when you know about Uvalde, about a governor who, when he first learns about this, reads things, or at least the information about, at that time, 14 children killed. He happened to be in Abilene, Texas, the day that that slaughter took place. You know what he does? He had a choice. He could come down to Uvalde that night, as those parents were still looking for those buses to drop off their kids, still identifying their children by the shoes that they were wearing, or later that night, the DNA swabs that were taken from them. Or he could go to a fundraiser 300 miles in the opposite direction. Well, you know what he chose to do? He went to that fundraiser. He went there to take checks from campaign contributors instead of being there with the parents, the very people that he serves in his position of power and public trust. He could have been there to comfort them, and he didn't. He shows up the next day, first words out of his mouth, "It could have been worse." I have met those parents, and I tell you, to a person, they understand, no, sir, it could not have been worse. And in fact, every single detail that we learn shows us just how bad it was. For more than 70 minutes, on the other side of an unlocked door, you have every manner of law enforcement, including state law enforcement, not lifting a finger, not going through that door, not putting themselves between that shooter and those kids or those teachers, not saving the lives that could have been saved. And we have yet to get answers or any accountability from this governor. He's more interested in covering up. He's more interested in protecting the status quo. He's more interested in making sure that an 18-year-old can buy not one, but 2 AR-15s and hundreds of rounds of ammunition and use that weapon to shoot those high-velocity, high-impact rounds into the bodies of kids than he is in saving the lives of the most precious people in our lives today. If there's nothing else that you know about the choice before you right now, please know Uvalde. I'll tell you what, were I governor, I would call that special session. I'd bring Democrats and Republicans around the table and I'd say, look, I want to begin with this. I understand that we will not agree on everything. But if we allow perfect to become the enemy of the good, we'll never get anywhere. We'll never protect those other kids who are going to be in the line of fire, I guarantee you, unless we make some change right now. How about this, I'd say? What if, at a minimum, we raise the minimum age of purchase for an AR-15 from 18 years to 21? In the case of Uvalde, that would have purchased us 3 more years. Now, I expect a colleague from across the table to say, Beto, you know what? That sounds like a good idea. Criminals don't follow the law. And I'd concede that. I say, you know what? Criminals don't follow the law. That's what makes them criminals in the first place. But this shooter in Uvalde patiently waited for his 18th birthday. He did not try to break the law and acquire those AR-15s when he was 16, nor when he was 17. The law said you must be 18, so 18 it was. That's when he walked into that gun shop. That's when he bought those weapons. 21 would have purchased us 3 more years for some kind of intervention in Uvalde. And I remind those Republican representatives that the very mayor of Uvalde, we're not on the best of terms, but that guy joined every member of the city council in that community. And they sent a letter to the governor and said, please call a special session and at a minimum, raise the minimum age of purchase. I'd say, look, here's another thing that we could do. What about a red flag law, which says if you already have that firearm, but you're threatening to use it against yourself or against a family member or against somebody in a school, we'll have the power to intervene before it's too late. Well, when you talk to the parents in Uvalde, to that community there, they tell us that this young man was sending off such strong signals that his friends called him the school shooter before he ever walked into Robb Elementary and shot a single soul. Let's give law enforcement the ability to intervene before it's too late. You know, earlier, El Paso was mentioned. I lost 23 of my neighbors. The surviving family members have become very good friends. And we know in El Paso, as we're discovering in Uvalde, this will be with you forever. You'll never lose it. And the best that we can do is do everything we can to make sure that it never happens again to another community. But when that shooter ordered that AK-47 in Allen, Texas, that was used in El Paso, his mom called the police department there. And she said, officer, I'm calling because my son just ordered and received an AK-47. I have no idea what he needs with this kind of weapon. And she may also have shared some other signs of distress in that young man's life. You know what the police said? Good luck. You're on your own. Nothing we can do about it. He drove that AK-47 650 miles to El Paso. He'd been told by Donald Trump that we had an infestation of animals and rapists and criminals who were coming to get us. He may have heard language from Greg Abbott, who sent a letter out that very week saying, Texans, you must defend yourselves. We must take matters into our own hands. He publishes a manifesto saying, I'm going to repel this invasion of Hispanics who are taking over the state, walks into that Walmart armed with that AK-47 and slaughters 23 people ultimately in a matter of minutes in a city that loses not even 20 people to murder over the course of an entire year. A red flag law would have allowed the police to respond to that shooter's mom when she called to say something's not right. And here's the last idea that I'd slide across the table if we called that special session as governor. Right now, if you go into a gun store, you have to go through a background check. We're grateful for that. If you have a violent criminal record, that gets picked up. If you have a history of self-harm or harming the people in your lives, we make sure that we don't put a gun in your hand because there's a good chance you'll use it against yourself or you'll use it against your spouse, your girlfriend, or your boyfriend. But in Texas, because we don't have a universal background check, when a person went into a gun shop in Midland in 2019, a month after El Paso, and tried to buy an AR-15 and was refused because he couldn't pass the background check, he went and purchased from a private seller, got the very same weapon, no questions asked, and in Texas, that's legal. Might not be okay, it's not all right by me, but it's legal. He used that firearm to murder 8 people indiscriminately in that community. And again, I have met the family members who lost someone on that day. They will never come back. They will never fully recover from that. But what they ask of me and all of us is that we do what we can with what we have, where we are right now, to make sure that no one else has to go through that. A universal background check would have stopped that massacre in Midland, Odessa. Now look, that won't stop every instance of gun violence. We know that. But it would do far more than what we are doing today to protect the people in our lives while still defending the Second Amendment. I guarantee you, at least bringing people around the table, we're going to be able to do better than what we have today. But as we come into our 15th week after this shooting in Uvalde, with nothing changed, nothing making it better for our kids and our teachers, we must think about what we can do after we win this election. What if we took it a step farther? In addition to protecting the lives of those in our schools against gun violence, what if we said, hey, it makes no sense that you have to tend bar on a Saturday night and also be a kindergarten teacher. Here in Val Verde County, on average, you are underpaid by $10,500 a year against just the national average. Not the highest paid teacher in America. Just to get to average, you're $10,000 down a year. No wonder you're working 2 or 3 jobs to make ends meet. Here's my proposal. We pay you enough so that you just work that one job, focusing on that child in front of you, unlocking her lifelong love of learning. If you're a retired teacher and you gave every working day of your life to this community, to these kids, to this state, to this country, and you have not seen a cost of living adjustment since the year of our Lord 2004, and your costs have adjusted somewhat in your life a lot since 2004, maybe 9% just this year. Your property taxes have gone up under Greg Abbott. Your electricity bills have gone up under Greg Abbott. When he shut down international trade at our border, your grocery bills went up under Greg Abbott. Welcome to the Texas $5 avocado under Greg Abbott. We need to make sure that those retired teachers get a cost of living adjustment every single year. We need to have their backs. And you know who's going to help me do it? In addition to having Rochelle and Susan Hayes and these other great Democrats up and down the ballot, I am going to name a classroom teacher as our next TEA commissioner. So we have someone who understands what it's like to be in the classroom. That's how we're going to make it better. And I want to do all of this without not only not raising your property taxes, I want to do all of this and actually lower your property taxes. Okay, how is this guy going to do this? Let me explain. I mentioned earlier, we're the 9th largest economy on the planet. We do not lack for resources or wealth in the state of Texas. It's a $2 trillion gross domestic product. The biennial budget is set at $250 billion. We have the resources, we just need to prioritize it. Right now, we force your local school board to come up with the money to pay your teachers. And I understand the predicament that they're in. If they raise your salaries, they're going to have to raise your property taxes throughout this community, and they're kind of caught in a bind. Here's what we need to do. It used to be in Texas that the state spent 50% of the cost of public education. Today, it's 40%. I'm going to work with Republicans and Democrats alike to get us back up to 50%, to lower the amount that you have to pay locally, thereby reducing your local property tax bills. And in addition, además, we're going to do this. Right now, we are the least insured state in the United States of America. That means you may have diabetes, you don't qualify for Medicaid, you're not wealthy enough to afford private insurance, and so you don't fill that prescription for insulin. You die a younger death, you develop glaucoma, your care in the emergency room is that much more expensive, that much more painful for you. It's an immoral way for us to take care of or neglect one another, better said. We accept Medicaid expansion, which just means that we take back $10 billion of our federal income taxes that we paid up to DC every single year coming back to Texas, $10 billion that we use to stand up more rural clinics and hospitals, $10 billion that we use to hire more providers to come to underserved communities. $10 billion that we use to say, listen, you grew up in Valverde County, you can't afford medical school, we'll strike a bargain with you. If you promise to come back and practice medicine here for 6 years, we'll pay your full ride to medical school. And we'll do that when we expand Medicaid. And you're no longer on the hook for uncompensated indigent care at your county hospital. Medicaid will pay for that. That lowers your property tax bill. Here's the kicker. We came up with this stuff. Lyndon Baines Johnson, the first president from the state of Texas in 1965, signs Medicaid into law. And the idea is a bipartisan one. Every single one of our border states, at least on the American side, have done the same thing. Louisiana, Arkansas, Oklahoma, New Mexico. 3 of those 4 under Republican governors have all taken the deal. It just makes too much common sense not to do this. And again, there are a critical number of Republicans who will support us in getting that done. A couple of other ideas that I want to lay on you right now. What if we invested in the infrastructure of this community? I talked to your new mayor about what it would mean to have a second commercial bridge, to have more commercial lanes coming through here, to follow up on the great work that previous Mayor Lozano did to make sure that we have a ports to plains program where we have true 4-lane highways at a minimum that connect Del Rio to every single part of the state. So what we make or what comes through here can get to markets so that we can drive safely on our roads, to invest in broadband internet, in the water resources that we need over the long term, in the infrastructure that has been neglected, because Del Rio, like so many parts of this state and this border, are taken for granted by those in power. We win this election, we start investing in ourselves right here. And that means we attract more employers, higher paying, higher skill, higher value jobs right here in Del Rio. No more reasons for young people to go to Dallas or Houston or Chicago or New York or somewhere else. We want the rest of the world to beat a path to Del Rio. We want them to come right here. And no more minimum wage. It's $7.25 an hour. We raise that minimum until it is $15 at a minimum so that you work just that one job instead of 2 or 3 to make ends meet. So think about that. When our Democratic friends who say, what is this guy for? Our Republicans who say, I know Abbott's really extreme, but what is Beto doing on the other side? Our independents who say, look, I can't trust either party right now. I know that you went and saw Beto at Doc Holliday's. What did he have to talk about? Well, he said that he wanted to make sure that we prioritize the lives of our kids and that we made common sense changes to our gun laws to defend the Second Amendment. He also wanted to make sure that we invest in healthcare so everyone can see a doctor or fill a prescription. He talked about having the backs of our public school educators so that we have a superior system of public education in the state of Texas. And he talked about investing in the infrastructure of Valverde and Del Rio so that we attract more and higher paying jobs. World-class schools, better jobs, the ability to see a doctor. That's what this campaign is about. That is what is going to bring us together. And against this is the extremism of our current governor. Not only am I confident that we are going to win because we are running for the right reasons, to do the best by and for one another, but we're running against the worst governor in the United States of America today. Let me lay it down by the numbers. It's been 9 days since Greg Abbott's trigger law went into effect, which outlaws abortion beginning at conception with no exception for rape and no exception for incest. But for those of you concerned about rape, don't worry. Greg Abbott says he will eliminate rape in the state of Texas. I don't know if you heard this one. The problem with that, we looked at the numbers. More rapes have been committed in the state of Texas than any other state in the union. Since this guy took office 7.5 years ago, the ability to bring a perpetrator to justice has declined by half. There are more than 3,000 untested rape kits right now at DPS headquarters in Austin, Texas. So I'm afraid he's not going to eliminate rape. He's only going to make it harder for women to survive because we lead much of the country in a maternal mortality crisis that is exacerbated by this attack on women. So I tell you this, we win this election and we fight for every woman to make her own decisions about her own body, her own future, her own health care. It has been 18 months since the genius in the governor's office could not keep the power on, could not keep the lights running, the heat going, the water flowing in the energy capital of the world. People froze to death in their homes. They froze to death going out to their trucks to charge their oxygen tanks. They burned up in their houses, lighting their furniture on fire because it was the only way to keep their kids warm, or so they thought. And to add insult to injury, he allowed his buddies, the gas traders, the pipeline CEOs, to take $11 billion from us over those 5 days when Texans were freezing to death in their homes, the largest transfer of wealth in Texas history. And he charged you with the bill. You're paying at a minimum now $45 more per month, every single ratepayer across the state of Texas, though you have nothing to do, no culpability and no blame for what he and those responsible did. And the worst part about it all, he has yet to fix the grid. Well, here's what we do after we win. Number one, we weatherize every single part of the grid so that it runs even when the temperature drops. Number two, we connect our grid, ERCOT, with the national grid so we can pull down power when we need it, send it back up when we want to sell the surplus. And number three, we get those $11 billion that were stolen from us and we return it to the ratepayers of Texas to lower your utility bills going forward. What do you think about that? We should be able to do that. And 7.5 years, that's the other number I want to leave you with. 7.5 years to fix just any of the problems that he began with. I mentioned CPS. When he took office, federal judge Janice Jack said, "This program is one in which kids emerge more damaged, Mr. Governor, than when they went in." Just this January, she says, "That problem I first described to you back then has gone from bad to worse." I don't know if you see a trend here. This guy, Greg Abbott, is warned about things that are broken. It could be CPS, it could be grid, it could be school safety and school shootings, and does not a single thing. Looking after his cronies, the polls, Fox News, his largest contributors, everyone except for the people he is supposed to serve. You deserve a governor whose number one priority is you and your families and will do everything in his power to make sure that he delivers for you. We are going to be able to do that when we win this election on the 9th of November 8th. You all with me? Let us come together and make sure that we make history, win this election, deliver for Texas and Del Rio. I am so grateful that you came out here today. Let us do this. Let us win. Thank you, Del Rio. We're going to take some questions, some suggestions. We've got another microphone here in the room.
Over here, Beto.
Cynthia Cano's going to introduce our mayor, and then we're going to have time to listen and learn from others who want to have a chance at the microphone.
Mayor was here, but he had to step out. He just wanted everyone to know that he's here, he's supporting, but unfortunately he did have to leave. So we're going to go to our first question, and then if you have a question, raise your hand, and I will make my way and get to as many people as I can.
Thank you very much. Mr. O'Rourke, my name is Sandra Fuentes. I'm a co-chair of the board organization, and I have to tell you right up front, we're a nonpartisan political power group. We don't support Democrats, Republicans, or candidates. However, hearing you speak today, you have hit almost every single issue that's on our agenda. From expansion of Medicaid, it will help a lot greatly here in our rural area with health care, to the grid, that's on the agenda. And you said that the state of Texas have taken us for granted. I think I would venture to say that they look at us as the red-headed stepchild, okay? They forget about the border, okay? You were talking a lot about education and teachers, and we greatly agree with you. Not only the active teachers, but the retired teachers have been underpaid for a long, long time. Healthcare can also be helped money-wise. $2 billion a year is what Governor Abbott is on track for spending on Operation Lone Star. What have we gotten from that? Because they're still coming over, right? In fact, I think we lost a contract or that Mexico was going to build a railroad through here. Now they're going to New Mexico, all right? So, and I believe, and I haven't proven this yet, but our local high school band cannot travel to out-of-town games because it's $6,000 to rent a charter bus. And I think it's because the prices have gone so high because of the state paying for the buses to take the immigrants to other states. So my question to you is this: if you're elected to become our next governor, can you commit yourself that all those billions of dollars going towards fighting immigration, this is a federal issue, be used for health care, for mental health care, for teachers? And you also talked a lot about Uvalde. And Chris, you did a good job. You could have fooled me. You're a good public speaker. Just so you'll know, and just so you'll know, Chris, the border organization worked with the Valverde County, with the city of Del Rio, and with the school district to pass a resolution asking Governor Abbott to call the special session so they can up the purchasing age 21. We've been going to Uvalde, we've been there twice, trying to meet with people so we can start organizing over issues. So, back to my question. $2 billion, with a B, folks, $billion a year to fight immigration. This is a federal issue. Those money should be going to healthcare, mental health care, teachers, retired teachers, infrastructure. Oh, one last thing. Did you know that in Valverde County and in Webb County, now I suspect in other border areas, there are people without any drinking water? Yes, we need that money for our people here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. There are so many needs here. We were just in Eagle Pass earlier, and we met a young man who told us that there are 20 colonias in Maverick County that do not have water, wastewater, and drainage. Now, they pay their taxes. They live by the law. They follow the rules. They've done everything right. And for decade after decade, they are denied the most basic services that any American, really almost any human being, should be able to depend upon. In this state with these resources, certainly we can help them out. Let me answer the heart of your question about where we are right now in Del Rio, where I'm from in El Paso, and where I just was in Eagle Pass on the border. We deserve solutions right now. Mayor Lozano was talking about everything that came his way under his administration, and what this community did, rallying together, regardless of the differences between everyone, to make sure that you all were up to the task. But as you just pointed out, what we see right now is a failing of our federal government, a failing of our federal government under this administration, the previous administration, the administration before that. The last time a federal administration passed comprehensive immigration reform was under the administration of Ronald Reagan. Love him or hate him, or maybe you were born so late you don't even remember him, but that was the last time that anything meaningful happened in this country. What we don't need right now are stunts. Sending migrants, I think it's cost us now $13 million to Chicago, to Washington, D.C., to New York City. I think it's $1,300 a seat to send them out there. I don't think that's solving the problem. Building a few miles of wall, I don't think that's going to solve the problem. Involuntarily activating 10,000 members of the Guard, and I've listened to so many of the members of the Guard right here in Del Rio who told me they didn't have a week to say goodbye to their kids, to their families, to their careers for a 1-year deployment, whether it was in Valverde or Webb or Zapata or anywhere along the border. Now, is there a role for law enforcement? Absolutely. Could there be a role for some voluntary deployment? You know it. We have always had that here. But the billions that we are spending is not solving the underlying issues. And I want you to remember this. When you see these ads from Greg Abbott trying to scare you about the border, he's been the governor for 7.5 7.5 years. He's had a Republican majority in each chamber of the legislature for 7.5 years. He's had a Republican ally in every position of statewide elected office for 7.5 years. And this is where we are today. He has no one to blame but himself. But let me tell you, listening to those in this room, listening to Republicans across this state, as well as Democrats and independents, this is what I think we can do differently and better. One, we make sure that anyone who comes to this country follows our laws. We say, listen, we recognize that we are a nation of immigrants. And the immigrants who come here to better themselves and have made us better as a result, stronger and safer and more successful than we've otherwise been, that's one of the greatest benefits that we can claim as a country, as a state. But if you come here, you must follow our laws. On our part, we're going to make sure that since Ronald Reagan that we've rewritten those laws, that Texas takes the lead in doing that. And we make sure that if you want to come here to work, for example, there's a safe, legal, orderly path for you to follow. If you want to come to join family, and right now the wait time from Mexico is 20 years. If you want to get in the back of the line and do it the right way, we make sure that there is a safe, legal, orderly, and quicker path for you to be able to do that. If you want to seek asylum or refuge and you're waiting 6 years for the adjudication of your claim right now, we want to make sure that's more like 6 weeks, a safe, legal, orderly path to be able to claim asylum. And listen, if you pass, then welcome to America. And if you do not, we must follow the law and you must return to your country of origin. If we do that, we will not only be doing right by those who live here in Del Rio, the taxpayer, the citizen, those who are serving this community. Not only will we do right by the immigrant who's doing what so many of our forefathers and foremothers did before us, but I'll tell you what, when I think about those 8 lives lost yesterday, just outside of Eagle Pass, 8 people who drowned. Imagine, just put yourself in the mind of somebody who's about to cross that river that is swollen from recent rains, maybe risking the life of their little child. If I had to think about what would compel me to take my little Henry, 11 years old, to grab his hand and say, you know what, I don't know if we're going to survive this, I would only do it if it were my only choice. If I knew that to fail to get him across, I'd have to take him back somewhere where he would surely die. That's what so many of these families face. The 53 people who died in the back of the trailer, again, what would cause you to get in the back of that hot trailer on a summer morning? What would cause you, once you're in the trailer, to reach down and grab the hand of your daughter and bring her into that trailer with you? Come on, people, think about that. These are human beings that we are talking about right now. You don't do this for kicks or a free ride or to steal someone's job or place in our community. You do it probably because you have no other choice. Let's make sure that there's a safe, legal, orderly path for you to do that. But the other person I think about that Border Patrol agent. I think about that member of the fire rescue team in Eagle Pass. I think about that sheriff's deputy who went into the water and they risked their own lives, these members of law enforcement, to try to save the lives of others. Those Border Patrol agents are bearing the entire broken immigration system in this country on their backs right now. We do them a deep disservice by failing to fix it and somehow thinking that they are going to be able to do this on their own. Wouldn't it be something if after we win this election, we come together right here in Del Rio and we decide what the future of immigration is going to be in the United States of America, and we base it on what's happening right here in the state of Texas. And yes, use those resources where they can do some real good.
Yes, hi. My question was to you that you mentioned medical and mental illness is very close to my heart, but I want to see if you can tell me exactly what you plan to do. There's so many people out there that don't get the help, that need the help, and we're crying out loud and nobody hears us. Everybody turns the other way because they don't want to see us, they don't want to recognize us, and they don't want to know us. And I want to know exactly what you plan to do if you get elected.
I'm so glad that you asked this question because you're elevating an issue that you are absolutely right about. Too many people look the other way or just completely turn their backs on it altogether. I think it's how we've ended up where we are today in the state of Texas. We are 51st, and I had to think about that because it means we're behind every other state and the District of Columbia in the ability to see a mental health care provider. As you know, I'm traveling to almost every county in the state. Some counties literally do not have a single psychiatrist, a single psychologist, a single therapist, or social worker. You just go without. And what you also understand when you look at the numbers and listen to the people in these counties, the rate of opioid abuse through the roof, the rate of self-medication, of overdose, and death, also frightening numbers that we are seeing throughout the state of Texas. And perhaps the thing that gives me the greatest shame, our largest provider of mental health care services today is the county jail system. It happens throughout this great state so bad that our largest inpatient mental health care facility is the Harris County Jail in downtown Houston, Texas. I've been on a tour through that facility with the Harris County Sheriff, who has described to me that when they should be out there preventing or bringing to justice those who perpetrate violent crimes, they are really serving as a warehouse to lock up and store people who are not lucky enough, and that's all we are if we have health insurance, who are not lucky enough to be able to afford to see a provider. And so they will go to a deputy with their untreated schizophrenia or bipolar disorder or clinical depression and literally too often ask that deputy to lock them up, to be taken care of for a little while, maybe to be prescribed a psychotropic medication, and then they're out on the streets again. It costs you and it costs me, the taxpayer, Gossi, about $120 a night to keep someone locked up. So not only is this unconscionable, not only is this immoral given the wealth and the resources we have, it's really expensive. For a fraction of that $120 a night, we could provide consistent preventative care, access to a provider, that psychiatrist or psychologist. I talked about expanding Medicaid. That is the first place we start, that $10 billion that comes in of our own money every year. But to be clear, that will be insufficient to the task at hand. We're going to have to invest more if we're going to move from 51st to #1 in America. And I won't stop until we are there. And I want to tell you this, we've got the resources to do it in the state of Texas. We just have to prioritize the people who need it. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
So I know you talked about what you plan to do for the teachers and for the guns and stuff in schools, right? But my question is, we saw glimpses, and we continue to see glimpses, of how law enforcement failed Uvalde. And when you're talking about law enforcement, you're talking about local, school, BP, CBP, I mean, every agency that you can think of was there and failed Uvalde. What are you gonna do to try to help these agencies, especially because we are a big state that has a lot of Border Patrol, CBP, where we're all talking and they're all getting to do something and actually getting to the problem. Because I know that the school police is the one that's taking the brunt of the blame for it, but it's not just him, because it's everybody else that was there that day.
There were dozens of state DPS troopers on site, many there over the course of those 70 minutes when that unlocked door was never even attempted to be opened, right? There has been no accountability, no clear answer. The governor said he was misled by whom? Why is there not justice yet? You know, the three things I hear consistently from these families in Uvalde: one, I want to make sure that you never forget my daughter or my son, my sister or my mom. Two, I want to make sure that there is real justice and accountability. And three, I want to make sure there's action so that this never happens again. But the justice and the accountability piece, just like the action, we're making no progress today. Those families, just like all of us, are learning about this through members of the press who are reporting the news. And imagine what that feels like to have that trickled out, one fact at a time, one released video clip at a time, and yet to not know the answers for who is accountable, who is responsible. I know from listening to members of law enforcement for whom I am deeply grateful, and who have some of the most important and most dangerous jobs in our communities, that absent trust, their job becomes almost impossible. If members of the community do not trust law enforcement, they're not going to report crimes. They're not going to testify in trials. They will not serve as witnesses. We will not deter the violent crime that we have. Will not bring perpetrators to justice. We cannot have trust and good faith in law enforcement until there is accountability. We want to make sure that they are fully funded, that they have the training that they need, that we support them in every way that we can. But if we fail to hold them accountable, when they fail us literally at the moment of truth for those kids, then it begs the question whether there will be trust in Uvalde or in any other part of Texas with DPS going forward. We need answers from Steve McCraw. We need answers from Governor Abbott. When I am governor, if he still stonewalls us and will not tell us the truth, I will make sure that it is a priority, that we get justice, answers, and accountability for the families in Uvalde. Thanks for asking.
To your left, and this gentleman, and then I do one more lady right here, and those will be our last two questions.
My name is Jesus Ramon. I'm a bilingual counselor, associate. And my question to you specifically is about mental health. The bottom line is we need more funding. With the border crisis, if I'm not, correct me if I'm wrong, they depleted a lot of funding from the human services to the border. And part of the program was to create fear, the machoism, so that they can vote for him, which leads to the white versus Hispanics. And the bottom line is we have a big, pink, green elephant in the room that we must tackle it now. Uvalde is just the tip of the iceberg. It's going to happen here in Del Rio if we're not aware. It's going to happen in Eagle Pass because we're not addressing the real issue. We need more Hispanics representation within the government to represent our real needs of Latinos. They don't want us to vote. Plain and simple. The more ignorant, the more isolated, the more lack of information, the better for them. You know, it's a war of misinformation. But we're the majority minority in Texas and in the U.S. My question is, what are we going to do with the mental health issue? Because just like the young lady said over there, which is true, they see him as locals. They see him as people who are not well. But you have to take into account our culture. And we're importing different parts of a culture from Venezuela, Colombia, and we're trying to fit into the white dominant culture. And that has to be taken into consideration. The cultural intervention of helping our population thrive. So my question is, as governor, what are we going to do to help our Latino population, give them the recognition, the acknowledgement, but put them in places of representation where they can be decision makers, especially in the mental health?
Thank you so much for asking this question. And one thing that you said at the outset was the depletion of the already underfunded mental health care account. You know, when Governor Abbott went to Uvalde the day after the shooting, he went to the fundraiser first. Next day he comes to Uvalde. He says it could have been worse. And then he says this is a mental health care issue, which is strange because on his watch over the last 7.5 years, we've become 51st in the nation. And then the month before Uvalde, he takes $211 million out of the mental health care account of the state of Texas to play more of these, theatrical games on the border instead of coming up with solutions for the real needs that we have here. No one's going to argue that we have needs here on the border. We absolutely do. But when it comes to mental health, in addition to the funding, which is really important that we just talked about in answer to the last question, where that funding goes and who has say over the disbursement of that funding is just as important, which is the point that you are making right now. When we were in Uvalde for the march that was organized by those parents that ended up in the Placita, somebody came to me who was a counselor in the community. She said, "Hey, Beto, despite all the attention we're getting, all this money that's been raised, we're running out of resources to take care of people in this community." When I talked to another teacher at Robb Elementary, it had been months since that shooting, still waiting to be able to get in to see a therapist. When I look at the communities of the border, which are 90, 95, 98% Mexican American, and we talk about a state that is the least insured in America, these are the least insured communities within the least insured state. So making sure that these communities are prioritized for that funding, and then we also have people in positions of power and public trust, whether it is Rochelle Garza as the AG, or those who direct funding for HHS in the state of Texas, or local mental health and public health authorities. I want to make sure that these resources get to where they need to be. One of the things that I've heard from these outstanding educators is that our elementary, middle, and high schools are a great place because they are a hub for the community to connect kids and sometimes their parents and siblings and even grandparents with the care that they otherwise would not be able to get or wouldn't begin to know where to find. So I want to follow your lead and lead of others in the community who are willing to step up and to take this on and be your partner in the Capitol to get it done. Thanks for asking. Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Okay, this is going to be our last question.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Rogers. I'm a counselor in this community, and I'm so grateful that a lot of other people have brought up mental health because it's a big concern for me. But right now, my concern right now is there's a handful of us counselors here in Del Rio on border towns that have our provisional license, where that means we're supervised by another counselor as we're rounding up our hours. We can practice. Our thing is there's nowhere for us to practice on these communities that can charge that because we can't charge insurance, we can't charge Medicaid as having our provisional license. So we have to work under somebody else, and there's nobody here for us to work under. And so we either have to charge on our own, which is a lot of people can't afford, or we have to leave the community to work somewhere else. So that totally diminishes our ability to serve this community as counselors with a provisional license. When eventually we'll get to the full license, but it takes up to 2 years. So that's a concern for us. I can count 5 people here between here, Del Rio, and Eagle Pass that have that license. We can't practice in the school because we don't have a teacher's license, and we can't practice with charge insurance. That really limits us. People say more counselors, more counselors. We're here, we're restricted. There's so much that we can do. So we need help to be able to where we can provide the community. We're here, we just can't, we're restricted. What's your concern with that?
Thanks for being here and for asking this. One of the ways that we can address what you just described is to expand the scope of practice and the practice authority for those in your position and others in different fields of medicine right now who may not be a psychiatrist or a medical doctor, but de facto are the only resource or provider in a given community. I go down to Presidio and I meet people who tell me that they were delivered by the veterinarian because they don't have an OBGYN in the community. That's the best that they could do right there. What if we did more to attract, I mentioned growing our own, paying for people to get these medical school or nursing school educations on condition that they come back to the community. And if they know how to take care of those patients, if we expand their scope of practice or their practice authority so that they can see more people and charge Medicaid and Medicare so more people can afford it, we're going to connect more people with care. It may not be the perfect solution for everyone, but again, if we allow the perfect to become the enemy of the good, we're never going to get anywhere. It's better than what we have today. So I'm so grateful that you raised this issue. It's another way that we can connect more people with care in the state of Texas. Del Rio, thank you so much for having us out today. What a great meeting, what a great way to spend our Saturday night. Les agradezco, muchísimas gracias. Thank you so much.
We're going to stay and take pictures and say hello back here by the Texas flag if you'd like to join us. So again, if you'd like to stay, take a quick picture or say hello, come on to the back.